Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have me a very special guest, Samir. Sadir, how are you doing today?
I'm good, my friend. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, excellent, excellent. Like I said, I got kind of stopped because of work, but I'm halfway through the crew. I'm like 51% of the way through. So, usually I talk to people before reading their book, but I had some time a couple of months ago, or a couple weeks ago, so I was like, I'm gonna just start this now.
All right.
So I was
Appreciate
really
it.
Yeah, so like it's been interesting. I've been telling people like, sometimes I talk to authors beforehand and
Hmm.
then I get like kind of the director's cut. So I'm kind of glad I didn't finish your book yet because
Hmm.
I got some cool questions to ask you and I'm actually interested in the writing aspect too. And a lot of times it really gives me an insight into and it gives me a better experience when reading someone's book. So
Yeah, I can,
so I'm
I can
kind of
see that.
interested. You're the first one that I've done where it's been like partway through, so I'm kind of
Okay.
interested to see if I like it more than talking to the author before or after. So we'll see how it goes there. But I
All right.
always learn something new when I talk to the author before finishing or reading their book. So I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to
Yeah,
doing
sure.
that. So we'll
So,
get right started there. For that first question, what has your writing journey been like up until this point?
all right. So I would say that I started writing seriously, and with seriously, I mean started writing prose
Hmm.
around 2014. So about 10 years ago or so,
Okay.
is when I decided I wanted to like start writing books, So I took a couple of years and I wrote my first novel, which was like a more of a grim, dark, epic fantasy novel with multiple POVs and all that jazz. By the end of it, I wasn't satisfied with it. I thought, as you're writing it, you think this is going to be the book that starts your writing career and stuff like that, right? But like, I sent it to a couple of beta readers. I did 4 or 5 drafts. I had the final thing polished and everything, but I was just like, the beta readers, their feedback, like it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like super good, somewhere in
Yes.
the middle. And
Yeah.
you don't want to be in the middle, you don't
Yeah.
want to be like a meh experience, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So I made the hard decision to just put that book away and write something else instead. So that is when I started writing The Crew.
Mhm.
So the thing with the first novel was that I worked many years in the video game industry as a producer and as a project manager. So I have a lot of experience of project management. So that's how I approached writing the first book, just to finish it, by setting daily goals and like breaking it down and having a complete outline, and like everything was planned in detail before I started writing it. So when I started writing The Crew, I decided to do the complete opposite, which was have no outline, have nothing in
Okay.
place. Yeah, and just go with it and see where it
Yeah.
took me. Yeah. So the only thing I knew going in when I was writing The Crew was that I wanted it to be more isolated than the first book, because the first book was like, 4 different POVs in different parts of the world, and then they meet up towards the end. You've seen it a million times in other epic
Yeah. Yeah.
fantasy, right? Yeah. So for this one, I was like, I want it all to take place in one city, and I want it to be about a crazy sellsword that is forced to assemble another group of killers to take down the ruler. So that's all I had written down, and I wrote it down on my phone. I wanted it to be a one sentence pitch basically,
Mm.
and then I just went in, uh, and and the Crew was released 29th of November last year, so roughly 6 months ago now. Yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. 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 I
Yeah.
would say
Okay.
so.
Okay. Good. Good.
Hey, I just have a quick follow-up question.
Mhm.
So, would you say that the crew, 'cause this always interests me because this keeps popping up over and over and over again on this
Mhm.
podcast, and I find it interesting. So, I definitely want to do like kind of a longer segment on this.
Mhm.
Um, Kelly McCullough had this thing where before his Fallen Blade series, which I absolutely love, he wrote the book originally like 4 years before, something like that. And then he didn't really like what was going on, but he kept it. And he thought he almost was gonna just like back in the day, pen and paper, right? He was just gonna get rid
Mhm.
of it. So, but he kept it in the drawer, and then he did his web mage series, sold it, and then they're like, well, we want something else. So he went back to his original idea, and that's where he ended up evolving it into the Fallen Blade series, which I'm so glad he didn't get rid of because it's one of my favorite series.
Okay.
I absolutely love the characters.
Mhm.
So But I find that with a lot of people, like that ends up that original book ends up being something really special. So is the
Mm.
crew, kind of evolution of that first book, or are they separate?
I would say they are completely different and separate, except
Interesting.
for a couple of parts that have cannibalized from the
Hmm.
first book.
Yeah.
So the idea of God bones as the magic system was also the thing in the first book, but in the crew, as you know, the idea to actually snort God bones, to get your magical abilities was something that was an evolution from the previous idea of just having God
Interesting.
bones uh, collected or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, and some parts of the world that I was happy with, I also cannibalized for the crew, like some cities or some names or some continents or some of the world building, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
but
cool.
that's really it. Yeah. They couldn't be more opposite than each other, like in terms of tone and style
Oh,
and
interesting.
all of that stuff. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I just always find it interesting. I think it was not me. I like that that word cannibalizing, but somebody we had on first season said harvesting, and
Mhm.
yeah, I harvested a lot from this, and I'm like, oh, that's a good way to put it. Like I was like, I didn't ever think of that. So I
Mhm.
just want to encourage our audience that my friends, he did the opposite, right? Like he threw this thing away and he never shared it with anybody. I'm like, that could have been your book, that could have been the crew, like. So I'm
Mhm.
really disappointed that he ended up doing that. So I would encourage people, like I have stuff I wrote when I was like 14. It was total garbage, but I went back, in recent years and took a lot. I harvested or
Yeah,
cannibalized whatever
yeah,
term you
yeah,
want.
yeah, of
And I've
course.
gotten a lot from it into a whole new world, or I evolved it
Yeah.
or whatever, and it's a lot stronger now. So I just always want to mention that that just seems to be over and over what
Mhm.
like it's never wasted material, I guess. Might
No,
get a
never, no,
person
never.
or like you said, a continent or I mean the God Bones are a really cool magic
Mhm.
system. So I would I've been really would have felt like kind of gypped, if I never gotten to read that idea because to me that was really cool. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
harvesting or analyzing your old work, whatever you want to say, is I
yeah,
think it's a really good idea. So I just encourage people to not throw anything away personally. You never know when
yeah.
that could be your idea. So
Yeah, I fully agree. I mean, all the ideas that you have, if you have them written down, you can always just look for them. You look back and see how you can make them fit in a new story idea. And often I find that I will have separate ideas for
mm,
different things, but then they will often merge in unexpected ways,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that I did not see coming at all. So yeah, write things down and keep them somewhere safe.
I think you said that really, really well. Like, yeah, where it comes in like blending or evolving it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it comes in unexpected ways. I agree. There were some things that came up in my epic fans or whatever, grimdark fantasy epic, what do you want to say?
Hmm.
Um, where I was like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
I had somebody ask me recently when they read a little something, they're like, how did you? I was like, I don't know. I had this original idea, probably saw a movie or read something cool
Yeah.
and then, blended it. I don't know. So
Sure.
I think that's
Sure.
what's cool about writing, right? Is, I want to do this at some point. I want to like you, me, and two other authors, right? And we each get the same basic outline and like plot, but
Hmm.
then write a different short story
Yeah. Yeah.
and then come together and then see how different they are. Like
Yeah.
same people, same names, you know what I mean? But you
Yeah.
basically you each come up with a different backstory and and all the other stuff. So I think that would just be so cool because I think a lot of people are like, oh, someone's gonna steal my idea. And I bring up Dirk a lot with it because he had never read Neil Gaiman. Um and then, once he had a certain idea for his first book with like how the gods were transporting
Yeah.
themselves, he even
Yeah.
used the same name as Neil
Yeah.
Gaiman, and someone's like, "Oh, you took a lot of inspiration from him." He's like, "What are you talking about?" So then
Yeah.
he,
Yeah.
read American Gods. He's like, "Oh, I got to change some things, otherwise people are gonna think I just took this, from Neil Gaiman." But it's interesting, right? Like where,
Yeah.
he still had things that even though they're called the same thing, they were totally different. So I think
Yeah.
it's always interesting to see how writers' brains work.
Yeah, and I would just to continue on that thread. Like the beautiful thing about writing is that it doesn't really matter what the initial idea is, on a
Sure.
concept level, because as you say, like if you, me, and two other authors get the same prompt, let's take the classic trope that I have in my book: an assassin is hired to kill a ruler in a city. You know what I mean? Okay,
Yeah.
but I promise you, like if you, me, and two other authors write that story, it will be completely different
Yeah. Yeah.
because what you bring as a storyteller is who you are as a person, and that's unique. So
Yeah,
that's why we keep always getting new stories, even though some of the ingredients or the fundamentals or the tropes, are familiar to us, because we like
yeah,
certain stuff. But the beautiful thing is that like we can put our own spin on them. And that's
yeah, yeah,
I think that's what resonates with people, because most people, they want something familiar, but they want something different at the same time. So the question is, how do you hit that, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and that's by, in my opinion, my philosophy when it comes to this is by infusing yourself. Like what do you think that you bring to the table, and try and find that. And
yeah, yeah,
that is what I would ultimately say is your writer voice, right?
yeah. No,
You can
totally.
open you can read a paragraph or two and know it's Neil Gaiman just by
Yeah,
reading those paragraphs from any of his books, right? Because he has a certain style that is
yep,
his. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
totally. Well,
Hmm.
it's funny that you mentioned that because, like, I mean, I like your assassin and your characters because it's totally different than what I would have done.
Hmm.
And I like people, they're like, oh, it's like, like true, it's like Deadpool meets this and that, and I'm like, yeah, that's true, but I also like certain things that you did versus like there are certain things I liked about like I like about Deadpool the character, and there are certain things I don't like about the character.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I feel like you took things that I liked about the character and then added some other things that made me um like your character a lot more than Deadpool, no offense to anybody. But but again, it's because you have you brought something into the character. I don't want to spoilers or anything, but like personal backstory, I'm like I can relate to your character more than I can Deadpool. So
Hmm.
to me that just it added a lot more to the story.
That makes
like
me
you're
happy.
setting a like you're setting a lot more too personally because it's like I love it. I'm just a sucker for like a desert setting. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just it's like I love all sorts of but it's like that is just I think it's because I've had some of my favorite stories have come from a desert setting,
Hmm.
from Forgotten Realms or
Yeah.
was it Dark Sun or whatever that
Dark,
they had,
yeah. I was
you know what I mean?
yeah, I was just gonna say Dark Sun is actually one of the big inspirations that's been with me for so many years, in the back of my
Yeah,
I
yeah,
always loved that world. And
it's so
you know,
cool.
yeah, and then being from the Middle East myself, and my heritage and stuff like that. So it came pretty naturally for me to try and
Mm,
write something inspired from a setting like that, and
yeah,
just
yeah,
deep a bit from the more European fantasy milieu that I mean, nowadays things are super diverse, so it's not as
yeah,
how it used to be back in the 80s when everything was just medieval Europe. So we're seeing a lot of cool
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's like I think my friend he's always like, "Oh, like I actually had a desert setting for one of my books and it's kind of like a fantasy Indiana Jones
Hmm.
kind of thing where got like this one guy and he's like a scholar, so particular class for me, but it's just interesting, where then I had this other one we got this heist going on and I was like it just isn't fitting in a desert setting, and I
Hmm.
switched it to like more of like a Eastern European or like Prussian kind of
Hmm.
setting, and it just worked instantly. A lot of things like clicked.
Yeah.
So I just yeah, but like my friend was like, "You're not gonna write it in like English." So I was like, "No." Like I
Yeah.
read, I love those. I was like read so
Yeah,
many
me
of
too.
those that inspired
Yeah,
me,
me
but I was like, I can't write that at this point because that's not things that have interested me. Your
yeah,
setting interests me a lot, so I'll do something similar.
that's cool.
But yeah, so it's always interesting, I think, to see
Yeah.
how like you said, like how people kind of branch out from there. I like unique stories, so anytime someone does something, I think I'm trying to remember who said it, but maybe it was like Rob J. Hayes on their podcast a while
Hmm.
back. But I think he said like as long as you do something new but do it well, people are going to enjoy it. So I think that's true.
Yeah.
So I just always like people's new ideas because it always makes me think a little bit deeper. So that's
Hmm.
what I think is fun about fantasy and sci-fi, right? You just get to write whatever you want. So
Yeah, exactly.
write
Exactly.
whatever you
Very
want.
much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Just
Very.
for the audience, so what genres do you currently write in and why?
So I mean, this series is definitely fantasy as the main genre, but then the subgenre, I wouldn't call it epic fantasy. I would more call it sword and sorcery, or like dark comedy, or humorous fantasy, action adventure, more that style, like fast pacing, a lot of action, a lot of stuff happening. Uh, yeah, that's how I would describe it.
My friend said it was Deadpool met Conan the Barbarian.
Okay.
I was like, I was like, I have to tell Sadir that because I was like
Yeah.
that. Those are two things that like he loves the Deadpool. I love Conan the Barbarian, and
Oh, that's
so he
awesome.
was like ripping through the crew. He was like, "Yeah, that's a good description."
Oh,
He's
that's
like,
awesome.
say that, please, say that, please." I was
Yeah,
like, "I'll
yeah,
tell him." So I thought that was really cool. But
yeah.
I do have to say though that like, and in terms of the crew, like it does have just like great sword and sorcery vibes. And I'm gonna blame you for this, Sadir. I'm gonna blame you.
Okay,
All right.
okay,
So I'm going through the crew, and then I was writing one type of. I'm gonna blame you and Paul S. Kemp. So I was
okay.
writing one Amazon Kindle series, and then I was reading through the crew, and Sword and Sorcery vibe was getting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was listening to Paul S. Kemp, so I was re-listening to his Hammer and the Blade series, which is great, and it's basically like kind of like a Fitz Lieber sort of thing. We got these two
Okay.
like
Yeah.
thief guys who like are grave robbers. Sometimes they do all
Mm-hmm.
sorts of stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
it's what happens when two morally great characters have to do the right thing, and it's
Yeah,
like a buddy cop fantasy story. So
yeah,
between your reading your book The Crew and listening to his again,
yeah,
I had to create my own sword and sorcery buddy cop series.
yeah, yeah.
So that's where I came up with this new series I'm releasing in the fall. So
Oh,
I'm gonna
nice.
blame you too, but I just like the sword and sorcery vibes was all around me, so I had
Yeah,
to do
yeah.
something with it. So, but it was really cool.
I mean, that is, it's always nice to know if your stuff can inspire other creatives
Oh
to
yeah, yeah, yeah.
get the juices flowing and want to create something. So that just makes me happy, you know? So,
I don't know where I'm gonna put it. I don't know where you're allowed to put it on there, but I'm gonna make sure that because I just want like if people like my my Amazon or Kindle Vella series, I want them to know, you know what I mean? Like, well, Sadir Samir the Crew and Paul's Camp Hammer and Blade series, or inspirations. I think it's nice, right? Where again get that cross pollination, because
mhm,
you never know when somebody's like, oh, that's really cool, and checks it out. But
yeah,
yeah, so that'll be forthcoming in the fall. So just so
nice.
you know, though, you and Paul were the ones that inspired me there. So
Oh,
it was really
his
cool.
book sounds like something right up my alley, so I need to check that out.
I was gonna say that like
Yeah.
it's just really good, and it's kind of like a desert setting too. Like they go into a city and then they'll go off into the swamp area, then they go off to the deserts, and it's just
Mhm.
like it's really cool. But you and him, like I don't know, you guys had like similar vibes, and I think that's why as I was reading the crew, and then I
Mhm.
can't read on my way to work,
Yeah.
obviously, so I had to listen to something that was similar. So
Mhm.
that's why I went back to his series to re-listen to him.
Okay.
He hasn't written a new one in a while. There's like four of them, three or four of
Okay.
them. So I needed a little something, something, to
Yeah.
hold me over. And then I kept having the sword and sorcery vibe, so then I had to start writing my own. So
Oh, cool.
it's
Cool.
really cool. But I think you'd like it. So for our audience, I'm excited for this question. What is your book, The Crew, about, and how did you come up with this idea?
So the book is about. I'm gonna hold up the book here, if that's
It's an
cool.
awesome cover too. I love
Oh
it.
my god. So the book here is it's pretty straightforward. It's called The Crew. On the cover we have the crew in question. There's also a couple of characters that are in the group that are surprises in the story. So I purposely did not have them on the cover. But the story revolves around this guy being hired to take down what is known as a Bone Lord, basically a mighty ruler of an ancient desert city state. And he likes to play alone, but he's forced to assemble a group of other people to assist him because even though he wants to think he's strong enough to pull it off on his own, he's really not. Yeah, so he's forced to play with other people, and a lot of shenanigans occur, and a lot of banter between these group of people. And the question becomes like, will they actually pull it off and make things better for the city, or will they, leave it in ruins? Because they're kind of a chaotic group, to be honest with you.
I was trying to remember what the well, like Chris Evans, there was like that graphic novel that they made into a movie, and it was like they were all like it was kind of like a spy version of The Crew, but
Hmm.
it was like Idris Elba was in the group. Um like was it Jeffrey Dean Morgan was in it
Oh,
too?
something with King. Is that the one? No, Kingmaker.
It was
No.
just like it was like a funny spy movie, where but but my friend was like he was reading The Crew and he's like, "Oh, it's like this movie." I'm trying to remember what it was now, but it was a graphic novel. Yeah, then they made it into a movie and those guys are in it. And then oh,
Kingsman. No, is that the one?
No, but it was just like that though. It was a lot like
Oh,
that.
okay.
I'm gonna have to look it up
Okay.
at some point.
Okay.
But yeah, but my friend said that though. He was like reading the crew and he's like,
Hmm.
"Oh my gosh, it's just like," and it's got right on the tip of my tongue and my brain. But he's like, "Yeah, it's just like this movie." And he loved that movie, so
Okay.
he like
Okay.
flew through the crew. He was like, "This is like totally my kind of thing." He's like, "Just instead of spies, it's a fantasy setting with
Yeah.
these people." So I thought
Okay.
that was really interesting. But
Also.
yeah, I was like, "Oh, that's a good one." So I totally blanking on it now. So I'll have to look it up so you can
Yeah.
use
Yeah.
that as like
Please
to
do.
pull people in. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was a really good graphic novel too. But I just loved the opening scene though. So I just want to say to the audience too, like, just read the first scene. So
Hmm.
if you need anything other than that, then I don't know if fantasy is the genre for you, but it was really good. It really like was reminiscent of I don't know. I felt a couple of different vibes coming from there, and I really liked the opening scene. So I was like just like tearing through. I would have been done if not for the baby teething and work just gotten crazy. But yeah, it was the opening scene really caught me. It was definitely my kind of vibe. I really liked, the characters that you've created. Excuse me. Yeah, they definitely have, that sword and sorcery vibe. The humor is really great. So I just want to say that opening scene was really awesome. The only other person I think that caught me that well with the opening scene was uh, Christopher G. Brenning in his first book, The Hellborn King.
Okay.
So far, you two, I would say, within the last 10 years, both had like tied for your opening scenes.
Oh
That
wow.
really
Okay.
made me like hooked right away. And you guys wrote them very differently,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like just really caught me. And I got to say, not many people. I read a lot of books, listen to a lot of
Yeah.
books. Not many
Yeah.
people can do that. So I just want to say that opening scene was really really good. So that's what I'm always trying to to strive for is so
That's
people keep
awesome to
reading
hear.
right away. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was
I
awesome.
think yeah, I think like the purpose of the opening scene is to establish the tone of the story and like because the thing is this, when you write comedy, which is like a very small subgenre of fantasy books, right? People will immediately compare it to Pratchett, you know?
Yeah, yeah, every time.
Yeah, if I say humor, they think Pratchett, and this is
Yep.
not Pratchett at all. I haven't read any Pratchett books, but I know he's way more sophisticated and more satire and more like, and my book is way crazier, zanier. That is the vibe that I was going for. So that's why, in terms of marketing, I tried to compare it to Deadpool just to give people a sense that it's absolutely not the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Pratchett or yeah, this is like dark comedy humor, and it's gonna work for some people and it's really not gonna work for others. So yeah, so the
Yeah,
openings hopefully lets readers know immediately if this is something that's gonna work for them or not, because I don't want to waste their time.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I was like, oh, this looks really good, and it sounds really good. And I was honestly just curious from your cover, honestly, I was like, I just got to figure out who the crew is and how they're put together just from a writer standpoint. But, and when, like I said, sometimes when people say Deadpool, I'm like, there are certain writers for Deadpool where I loved them,
Hmm.
like any other character, certain writers where I'm like, I was out the door, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think recently in the comics I didn't really like the 90s Deadpool as much. I like the more
Mm-hmm.
recent Deadpool,
Yeah.
particularly in the comics. So, I would say, like, just personally, I think that you matched that type of writing and character
Mm.
more. I think it was because they made him more of a character recently than a caricature, if that makes sense. I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah,
back in the
makes
day,
sense.
he
Yeah,
was just
yeah.
kind of like, you know what I mean? Like he
It
was just
makes sense.
kind of
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
we're just gonna have him just do all these things and whatever. But I think recently they've just actually, because he's been more popular, I think they just let
Yeah.
him be a character. But yeah, so I feel like you really captured what I really liked about the character,
That's cool.
particularly in recent years. But yeah, that opening scene was really great. So I keep like rewriting my first Kindle episode. I'm just like, oh, it's not quite there yet. So my friend goes, just keep going, and then maybe it'll come later. But yeah, I really like that opening scene. I don't want to give too much away, but yeah, I really liked just like the humor that you had with that opening scene. I felt like we knew your main character, one of your main characters right off the bat,
Mhm.
rather than I know some people like don't really give you anything, you know what I mean, about that
Yeah,
character
yeah, yeah,
before.
yeah,
So I liked how you were just like, here's my book, here's the
yeah.
character, here's my book, essentially, here's the feel, and take me or leave me kind of thing. So I really liked it that way. So Yeah, but I highly recommend The Crew to people. Like read that first chapter and you'll get into it.
Cool.
When it comes to putting your crew together, what steps did you take to fill each role and make their characters unique? Because each one's really unique.
Yeah. I wish I
Like were
could
you,
give,
like
yeah,
were
I
you
wish.
like I was just curious, like were you like because I'm doing this with my own crew, right? Like
Mhm,
I
mhm.
realized like I got this heist and I'm like, okay, these two people, these two young thieves cannot get into this palace. Like they can't do it, like
Mhm,
they need a crew.
mhm.
And I'm just curious, like I'm trying to write out the problems that they have to solve, and then I have the minds of, like I'm like, okay, I want these particular like I have this illusionist, right? I'm like, well, they're gonna need somebody with magic, but I don't want to be super
Yeah,
powered, because she
yeah.
needs them as well. So I'm like, okay, she's gonna be illusionist and she can do these
Mhm,
things. So I
mhm.
was curious at like, did you kind of go with like the end game in mind and then kind of went with what characters you needed and then kind of started from there? Like I was just curious like how you put your crew
Sure.
together essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is this, like the crew has a heist vibe to it. I've heard from different reviewers and readers, but it isn't really a heist, you
Yeah.
know. So I think that when you write a heist novel or a heist story, you need to have things planned beforehand so that you have all of the different heist members fill a certain role directly tied to the heist that's going to occur towards the end of the book or story, right? So there isn't really a heist in my novel in that sense. So I didn't have anything planned for it. So it's not a very sophisticated answer from a writing craft standpoint because
Well, I think it is. I just personally think it is though, because
okay.
you had like because I think it's even harder though. Because for
Mm,
me, like I can be like, okay, here's this illusionist, and then I can be like, here's the problem, here's the person that's going to
mhm,
solve it, and here are some things that are going to go wrong and how she's going to help them solve that. And then I
mhm.
created character, then everything fell into place after, then I'm like, okay, well, she kind of gets close to one of the main
Yeah,
characters that,
yeah,
does this. So I feel like everything else kind of came. I feel like you had to do it in a more difficult way because you had to create these characters basically from no problem. Like I had a problem for them to solve. You didn't
yeah,
have a problem to
yeah,
solve. So I
yeah.
think it's harder to do what you did,
Okay.
and I'm just curious at like how you were able to create such interesting characters basically from like
Yeah,
having no problem to solve except for
yeah.
the fact that they're going to try to kill this bone lord.
Yeah. No, so the way I approached it was that I from having written the first pitch line, like I knew that there was going to be a crew of sorts, and that's just because I love that trope. I love ensemble casts, and I knew that my main character wouldn't play well with others, so I always wanted other characters forced to be around him and see how they would, you know, bounce off each other basically. And so that was really the only guiding light I had going into the story, that they would need more people to join them to take down the Bone Lord.
Hmm.
But I didn't have any other plans than that, really. Yeah.
That's interesting. I just find it interesting when how people do those things because I actually like that I'm doing the reason I did a heist for
Mm-hmm.
this one was like I had this character that just would not shut up, you know what I mean, over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
he wanted to be a short story, he wanted to be a novella, and he has a really tragic story. And
Yeah.
then over time it developed, it evolved, and then I'm like, oh, there's actually something cool here. I was like, actually, there's a trilogy here. It's pretty cool. And then after Cobra Kai, I was like, okay, I'm really into redemption stories now, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I want to explore that theme. Like, could somebody that's done such crappy things, particularly to the people that he cares about and loves, could they actually be redeemed?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just kind of kept going from there. But
Mm-hmm.
again, I thought it was easier personally as a beginning writer to go from a heist because there are all these different parts, and there's so many things. So I just give you credit for doing something, heist like, but in a
Thank
different way. And I think that's why a lot of people I've talked to, who have enjoyed the crew. When I was reading, I was like, okay, I love heists, and then I'm going through and
you.
I'm like, okay, we're assembling the crew, and I'm like, all right, I'm like, well, I'm liking it though because it's also different,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think anytime you do something different, again, you're going into deep waters that you're not quite sure if it's going to work or not. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
for
for
you,
sure.
it worked really well. So I just want to also point out to people in the audience who are writers that, just because it hasn't been done before or not in your way doesn't mean that it's not going to work,
Yeah,
so
no, for
because this
sure.
has worked really well. So
The only problem can happen is if people expect it to be, a more structured heist
yep,
happening, and then they could be disappointed that that is not the
yep,
case. Like, because like if you compare it to like Ocean's 11 or those movies,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
they really follow the heist formula, right?
yep.
So I think if that's what you want and you go in, then you might be a bit disappointed, but hopefully you will have enough fun with the chaos that occurs, and the things that happen, that you won't mind it too much. But I could see that making some readers be a little bit disappointed, but
Yeah.
hopefully not too much, and they will enjoy that it's a bit different.
Yeah, but again though, I personally feel like if you get through the first chapter, like if you had done the first chapter, I don't want to give it away, but if you had done the first chapter more like a heist, like a beginning heist, and
Hmm.
that main character was more like a thief,
Yeah,
then I would have felt disappointed a little. But
yeah,
the
yeah,
fact that you literally just lay it out there. You lay his character out there, and I feel like you really just put it out there, as this is what the book's about. And
yeah.
I feel like I wasn't disappointed then. I was like, oh, I was intrigued,
Okay,
So
cool.
I just feel like from a writer standpoint, it's a good lesson to learn because again, like if you read, if you're like, okay, even if someone just reads, your premise, on Amazon and stuff for the book, and then just reach chapter one, and then, I think like you could, and then just a little bit, I think you could see that okay, this is done really well because again, I think some people do the opposite, like they're like, okay, it's heist like, and they put that main character in the first chapter as stealing something, and then later on they're assassinating somebody. It's like those two things don't match. So
Yeah, yeah, I
I
see
think
what
that
you
you
mean.
matched them really well, where, expectations to me, were fulfilled right from the start and they just continue to be fulfilled. So I just think that, if anything, it's on the reader, for the expectations. But
That makes me very happy to hear. Yeah, that makes me very glad.
yeah,
So thank
I think craft wise, I think you did it really well. So that's like me, like I'm like I actually that's where I was going to go a little further into my episodes for my Kindle Vella series.
you.
But I was like, you know what? I my friend we were going through it together and I was actually talking about the crew, and he's like,
Hmm.
well, he's like, well, and we actually were discussing it, and he's like, well, what did you like about it? I'm like, well, I like that the beginning scene was like this, So we talked about crafting. He goes, I
Mm,
think you're just writing your story too far in advance,
mm,
like a year
mm.
down the road or 6 months. And he's like, I
Yeah,
think you actually have to go back. He goes, I think that I did the opposite of what you did. So he's
yeah,
like, I think
yeah.
that expectations are not going to be fulfilled. So I actually went back to the beginning of the story, and I think
Mhm.
I'm doing a much better job for fulfilling expectations. So I just
Cool.
think craft wise that you
Yeah,
did it really well. So I think that people could really take a look, and just with how you did it and really learn something craft wise. So
that makes me happy to hear. Yeah, I would like. That's awesome.
So what steps did you take when it came to your book release that you will keep in the future? And what are some things that you might change with your next book? I feel like I saw your book everywhere.
Okay, that's cool. What steps did I take? Uh,
It's like people were just sharing like nonstop. And then I saw you on Facebook, like someone had tagged you, I don't know if it was Dirk or
mm-hmm.
Anna Smith Spark, one of them. And I was like, oh, okay, and I was like, all right. And then I like started looking everything up. So I friend request you, I started following you on Amazon,
Yeah,
all these
yeah.
things. And I was like, okay. And I pre-ordered the book and I was like, this looks really cool. And then the next thing I know, like everybody, I know a lot of people for the book community, like everybody was sharing your book everywhere. So I was like, okay, this is gonna be really good. So
All right, awesome. So I didn't do I didn't do anything that is out of the ordinary. I would say I'm a very structured person, organized. Like I knew that. I mean, this is like a life-changing thing to release your debut novel, right?
yeah,
So like it's been years in the making. So I knew I wasn't gonna take any shortcuts. I only have one chance to make a first impression on the readers and the audience. So I invested a lot of money into the cover, right? And I think the cover played a
that was great.
massive role for me. the cover was done by an artist. His name is Love Gunnarsson. He's a Swedish guy, and we used to work together at a game studio here in Sweden.
Mm.
And he's a senior concept artist. So I always had him in mind when I was like, I'm gonna ask Love if he wants to possibly illustrate the cover for me, you know. So I mean, I think he knocked it out of the park. He's never done a book cover before. Yeah, so we
Really?
had to,
That's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, so we had to learn everything together, like how to properly format it for
Yeah, yeah.
Amazon and printing, and so we would sit on
Wow.
this and all of that. So yeah, so I think the cover played a big part. I did a book tour, a paid book tour as well. I would say that was probably the least successful thing.
Mm.
Because I don't have Instagram, and it seems a lot of book tours seems to have more success over on Instagram when
Yeah,
they
yeah,
actually post pictures of physical books and stuff. But since
yeah.
I live in Sweden, uh, it would basically be pretty crazy for me to send out that many books
Yeah, 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 yeah.
to that many people all
Yep.
over, you know, in the US and the UK, and shipping these days is just insane
Yeah, it's
cost.
crazy.
Yeah. So I would probably say that for the next release, the sequel to The Crew, I won't do a book tour. Because I ultimately don't think that generated. Another thing that I think is also like, I started getting involved in the sci-fi and fantasy community back in 2014, 2015. You know, so it's been like an organic thing for me, really. I started traveling to cons in England, meeting other people, meeting authors, making connections, being on Twitter, interacting, you know, sharing stuff about books I love and things like that. So I already had like a following in place, and I already had kind of a network in place because of time that I had invested over the years, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So like, instead of going on vacation trips, you know, I would put that money into going to a convention in the UK.
Oh, that's
Uh,
cool.
yeah, and when I went the first time back in 2015, I didn't know anyone. Uh, and people were like, you know, kind of awkward to go somewhere and you don't know anyone, you're from a different country. But people were so impressed and just like super helpful, because they're like, what you came from Sweden? Like, what are you doing here? I'm like, there's no cons, there's no sci-fi fantasy cons over here, you know, and I write in
Interesting.
English, right? So my book is marketed towards the UK and US audience.
Mm.
And people are just so lovely in this community. That's the best part about it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. So I just went to that first con, and people were like, "Oh, you're hanging out with us right now." And I met Christian Cameron, you know,
Oh, that's
famous.
awesome.
Yeah, and he was like, "Hey, I recognize you from Facebook, from one of the Facebook groups or whatever." And so then he spent so much time with me that evening and just introduced me to people. And
Oh, that's cool.
yeah, so that's been a staple for me ever since then. I travel every year. I haven't been on a like vacation for like 7 or 8 years. My girlfriend hates me for it, because she's like, when are we gonna travel? I'm like, I need to travel to these things because of my books, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So this year I'm going to Dragon Con for the first time, and at
Oh,
the end
that's
of
cool.
August. Yeah, so it's gonna be my first US convention
Oh,
as
that's
well.
cool.
Yeah. So to tie it back to your question, I think those things all build on each other, right?
Yeah, for
So like,
sure.
having a great cover, really, you know, investing in that cover, and making it represent what the story is inside inside the book. Connecting with other people, you know, and stuff, sending out arcs. So I basically did everything that book publishers usually do when they release a book. And I knew that since I went indie, I was going to approach this from a business perspective, right? I started my own business in conjunction with the book, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So so I had the whole release planned out and followed all of the steps and tried to do oh, another thing, sorry. I'm rambling on now. But
No, no, no.
I researched a lot how to do things. I looked at what other authors have done previously, tried to get as much information as I could, just to know what editors did they work with, what you know, who did they send books to, if they sent any books to people. And yeah, so I did a lot of research before I felt it was time and I was ready to actually release the book. So yeah, don't so advice for any aspiring authors out there that are planning to release a book: don't rush it. Like, take your time, do the research, because you want to do it as good as possible. You don't want to have regrets
Yeah.
afterwards. Uh, yeah, so I would say that's the case. Yeah.
I feel like I have people message me all the time. They're like, "Where can I find your stuff?" And I'm like, "I'm rapid releasing." I'm like, I'm not, I was like, I'm gonna do the Kindle Vella series,
Okay.
when it's ready, and um, it just really stinks. I'm hoping that we were hoping by holding off my Kindle Vella series to the fall. Like there's been talk for the last like 10 months that Kindle Vella was going to switch to to more at least European and North African and Middle Eastern countries and
Mm,
Australia really really quickly, and they just keep delaying it. So I'm
okay.
curious if they're going to do it like in the new year, but I'm like I don't think I can wait that long now. Got like my three novellas, which I'm
Okay.
basically gonna put into an anthology all together. They're like prequel novellas for my Monster Hunter. But like we want to do, but then I'm gonna like release my first fantasy novel. So it's like, it's hard because people like I like that people keep asking me, but like you
Yeah.
said, I'm like, no, like I have a crew, I have my own crew, I've
Yeah.
assembled of people who are like, my tech guy, and I've had
Yeah.
some authors and people that are helping me out with different things, and I think building a community, sometimes I get a little distracted building a community to help other people. Sometimes I forget, like, I could ask them to help me. I had
Yeah.
somebody where it's like, we paid for our furnace. It was like 10 grand and we needed that before the baby came, so we
Mm.
could have like heat in our house. So, then we had like an air problem. So we had to like, fix that with the vents and stuff. So I was like, well, there pretty much goes all the indie money, for,
Yeah.
the next like year. And somebody was like, well, you could just do a Kickstarter. They're like, enough people. They're like, you probably don't even need that much. They're like, what do you need? I was
Mm.
like, oh, editor and the cover. And they're
Hmm.
like, yeah, I bet if you did that. So I might do that eventually,
Yeah. Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
fall or something if I need to. But it's just interesting, like, um, I just like you said, community. Like I just enjoy being part of the community. Even when I went and met Brandon Sanderson, Kevin Hearn. Like before anybody knew who Brandon was, really, meetings had just come out.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, I met Patrick, both of us at the same place, but like I knew the indie people because they knew
Hmm.
Kevin Hearn. Ryan McCullum were there. Michael J. Sullivan was there. He was just hilarious. But I knew there was like so many people there, indie community, and that was the first time I ever met an indie author, and I met like 10 or 12 of them.
Okay.
And it was interesting because I talked to them more than I did Brandon Sanderson or Patrick Rothfuss. I
Yeah.
talked to Kevin Hearn a lot on social media and stuff. He's just a really cool guy. They really were like, no, like look at so and so's book over there, then look at their book. And I came back and I was like, you guys just quote each other's books, They're
Yeah.
like, yeah, we just help each other out. They're like, we come here to sell books and go to the Comic Con,
Yeah.
but really we just come to hang out with each other,
Yeah. Yeah.
And like that was my first experience. And they were like, I got so many cards and emails and stuff. They're like, yeah, let us know if you need something or whatever. So a couple
Mm.
people like Kevin, like I asked research questions or whatever, and I feel like
Mhm.
everybody's just been, been super cool.
Yeah,
Um,
people
Even
really are
before I
super
ran a
supportive.
podcast, like I was just like, oh, I have a question, So I
Yeah.
definitely think some people, forget that, there are a lot of people in the indie community that, really want to help each other. Like I want your book to succeed because
Yeah.
I want to read book two,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
on top of just wanting you to succeed.
Yeah.
I really want to read book two. Like Christopher G. Brenning was always like, oh, thanks for your help. I'm like, it's selfish, Chris, because this first book was amazing. And I'm like, I want him to keep writing. So
Yeah.
I was like, don't act like it's altruistic all the time. I was like, I
Yeah.
just want to read book two, book three,
Yeah.
So but yeah, I
No,
think
but
it's cool,
yeah, but I mean, you're absolutely like, I mean, you're correct in that. Like, people are super supportive, and like we're all in this together,
Yep.
And we need to remember it. Like, we're not competitors, right? We all bring our own different book. There's something for everyone, and if someone picks up my book, that doesn't mean they're not going to read another book by a different
Yeah,
author.
yeah.
So, and in my experience, like, people are really helpful when you have questions. Yeah, I mean, people are nice in this community.
Yeah.
They're actually nice. Maybe not so
Yeah, yeah.
nice outside of the
Well, I
people.
mean, I look at just like what I did, right? Like I was reading The Crew and then I was like, okay, like I need an Audible book. And I was like, I need an Audible from the
Mm.
same type of feeling, that your
Mhm,
book gave
mhm.
me, or the same type
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
sword and sorcery. So that's like
Mhm,
I have already purchased I have all of Paul's books. Like I think
mhm.
I only am missing one right now that
Yeah,
he's ever written, and I love him. Like he's one of my favorite authors. He inspired me to write. Trying to have him come on really soon.
yeah,
Um, but it's like I just, it wasn't like I was like, okay, I'm just gonna wait for Samir. I'm like, I need something else,
yeah,
to
sure,
hold me over
sure.
an Audible,
Yeah,
So I think that that just goes to show, like a lot of times you leave a particular taste in their mouth, for your genre or your characters or whatever. And if you don't have something, they're gonna go and find something else. But that never makes me not be like, okay, I'm not gonna go buy book two. I'm
yeah,
like, I'm
yeah.
gonna go back and buy book two.
Mhm.
So I just think it's kind of funny when people think that way. Maybe some people think that way, but that's not how I find most of us are like you and me, right? Are book
Yeah,
hoarders. I
yeah,
don't
yeah.
want
Well,
anybody to look at my
definitely,
Kindle right now
definitely.
because I think I bought like
Yeah,
30 books recently for 99 cents when they were on sale on
yeah,
Kindle. So
yeah,
I'll read them eventually. My wife's like, "You're like Smog or whatever that movie you like."
yeah,
Just
yeah.
collect
Now,
books.
someone said that someone compared it to like collecting books. Like they don't like. You should think about it as like collecting wine. Like it only gets
Yeah,
better
that's
over
true.
time. I mean, you're gonna read them at some point,
Yeah,
so they're not gonna go bad.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah. That's true.
so collect away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd much rather be surrounded by books than wines.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I,
me too.
I like that though. I'm gonna use that from now on. That's awesome. I
Yeah,
guess books and comics. I've been getting a little comic crazy again lately, but
yeah,
I found
yeah.
so many great indie comics, particularly for fantasy, horror, and sci-fi, where I've just been
Mm,
like on a huge indie kick. So I've been
nice.
trying to relax a little bit just so I can afford my own book covers, but it's hard.
Yeah.
So did you use any particular writing tools for your first book that you want to use again in your next book? Or are there any ones that you'd like to try for book two?
So I used Scrivener to write my first novel that didn't go anywhere, and I'm sticking with Scrivener for the foreseeable future. I love it. I think it's an excellent writing software, to be honest with you, for drafting. But then when it comes to editing, you need to go over to Word because
Yeah, totally.
Scrivener isn't as strong in that department when you have to share documents with an outside
Yep.
collaborator. So I use Scrivener, and then for formatting, I use Vellum.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
I don't think Vellum is exclusive to Mac. It might be. I'm not sure. Is it?
Ooh, I can't remember now because they were
Oh,
talking about it. So I can't remember if they decided it was going to be or if they opened it up.
yeah. Anyhow,
I'll have to
Vellum
look
is
that
a
one up.
fantastic. Yeah, it's a fantastic software for book formatting. To get like professionally looking books. Yeah, best money I've ever invested in any type of program, to be honest with you. Because if you would have to do all of that yourself, kudos to you if you have the skills to pull it off. Or you would need to hire someone to do it for you.
Yeah, totally.
But with Vellum, anyone can do it, and it's a one-time fee. Sounds like sounds like I'm working for them now, making a pitch. Getting a commission. No, I'm not. But I just love it. It made my life so much easier when I found it. I was so happy. So Scrivener, Vellum, and Word are the three powerhouses, and I don't need anything else at this moment, at least.
I'm definitely thinking of getting Vellum just because I feel like I've heard a lot of people, say, that it's really good.
Yeah, it
So
really
for
is.
me, I feel like, I think it'd be a good one to at least check
Yeah,
out. So
yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
cool. I actually keep forgetting that we have to check it out first, my tech guy and I, the next couple of months, because that's going to be like our one of our purchases on Labor Day because we're doing the same thing. I'm like setting up. I'm trying to. I don't know if we're like doing like an LLC or what we're gonna do, but that's one reason why I rearranged some of the products of how I'm
Hmm.
doing. Because we're hoping that I can get at least something going on Kindle Vella, even if it's
Okay.
like $50 a month or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like it at least comes right back in. And
Sure.
I'm gonna
Absolutely.
pre-write like 50 episodes, so
Hmm.
at least it's something to pull people over and to
Yeah,
advertise and stuff like that. But
definitely.
yeah. That was a good answer. I have to write down Vellum every time now. Which one of okay, this is one of my favorite questions I ask people. I always change it to tailor it to their book. But
Okay.
which one of the crew would you want to go on an adventure with and why?
Oh boy.
Picking your favorite child. Go.
they're all unstable individuals to some to some
To some
extent.
degree.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not sure that it would be a good time to hang out with any of them, really. Uh, but I mean, okay, so I would probably go with Arcade just because, like, you never know where life's gonna go if you hang out with someone like that. We're gonna get into a lot of trouble, that's guaranteed. But like, if you're already committed to doing that, then I think hanging out with him, you're not gonna have a boring time at least. Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably, yeah. But they're all crazy characters that I wouldn't recommend really hanging out with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably with Arcade, you're probably definitely gonna get arrested or at least have to,
Yes. Yeah, for
escape
sure.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
prison or
Yeah.
something like that. So yeah,
It
that's
could
awesome.
it could be lethal hanging out with him. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
have to give my friend, my buddy, Dave credit for that one because he was like, "Who would you want to hang out with or go on an adventure in the crew?" I was like, "Oh," I was like, same thing. I was like, I said, I feel we actually likened it to one of our buddies where we're like, it's like if you go out with him and Arcade are very similar.
Oh, okay.
So like
Interesting.
last time we all hung out, he's like, "I'm ready to get crazy." Like he
Yeah.
goes, "I don't even know if we're gonna make it home tonight." And I feel that's like Arcade, like in a nutshell. So
Yeah.
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 And as like I was reading, I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "I've literally heard my friend say some similar things."
Okay, that's awesome.
I'm
That's awesome.
just like,
I wanna meet this guy. I wanna
yeah,
meet
yeah,
this.
yeah, 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 yeah. I'll let him know. We'll figure it out. Well, we talked about going to Dragon Con. I mean, I'm like praying that my son, like his teeth and
Hmm.
everything. Like he had to
Yeah.
start out with some problems, and so he's doing pretty well now. But I'm hoping that he's just a little bit more. It's hard because like he just like it's like an hour goes by, like probably end up like another 30 minutes. He'll be like, "Where's dad?" So,
Yeah.
but like I said to my wife, I was like, "I really want to go to Dragon Con." She goes, "I don't know if he's gonna be able to handle you being on that long." So I'm
Yeah.
hoping by at least if I don't go this year, we'll go next year. But
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
can, my buddy and I can make it down this year, like maybe fly down real quick because we're
Hmm.
in central New York.
Okay.
So if we can
Okay.
fly down at least, for like 24 or 48 hours, maybe
That
I'll
would be
see him.
cool. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it'd be really cool. But I
I,
know
I'm
he'd be
ho-
down to go for sure.
yeah,
So
I'm hoping to making. I mean, let's see if I mean I think it's gonna be a wonderful time at Dragon Con. So
it seems to be
hopefully,
like the top three, that Glasgow and oh, I'm totally blanking on the other one because it's got an interesting name. But yeah, like I just feel like for authors, like Dragon Con, seems to be like top three every
yeah,
time. Like I have so many people have been on the podcast and that are going to be over the next like season where they're like, "Oh man, if you could make it, it'd be so cool."
yeah,
I'm like, "I
yeah.
know," and like we got t-shirts and stuff we're making and we're
Oh,
gonna throw
nice.
out swag and stuff. But
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just hard with the little one. And if my wife
Sure.
decides that she wants to go too, and we just bring him, then
Hmm.
I think it'd be really fun. But I definitely agree with that. To me, it seems like most people just have a great time. Usually, I'm coaching at that time
Hmm.
of the summer, so it's hard because I'm always had to be here working. But this year,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not. So
Okay.
that's why we're
Okay.
like, oh, we got to maybe try to get out,
Yeah.
if we can, and and get there. But it definitely seems to be top three from what everybody's told me.
Yeah.
So
I've heard great things
yeah,
about
yeah.
it for a couple of years now. So I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, it's. I knew I wanted to have. I knew that I was gonna try and make it this year. You know, I started planning for it last year, saving up money for it because it's a pretty expensive trip going over to the
Yeah, yeah,
US.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a 5 day con and all of that stuff. But it's yeah, I think it's gonna be a blast. So
Yeah, yeah.
definitely.
Well, I mean, have to twist my arm. I know you and a bunch of people that are going. So yeah, like
Yeah.
I'm just like,
Fingers crossed
yeah,
you can make it, man.
yeah, it'd be really cool. I said to my wife, I said, even if I just flew down with my buddy just for the day, just for like
Yeah,
one day, and then we
sure,
came back
sure.
later. I told him, I was like, dude, I was like, I'll pay for your ticket. I was like, if he just goes and helps me, maybe films or something like that,
Hmm.
while maybe I'd go around, maybe we could chat
Yeah,
real quick or something, and put like a couple YouTube videos together. I was like, I think it'd be just worth it just for the day
yeah,
because there were so many people last year that went where I'm like, no, I'm
yeah,
like, I
yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
talk. And then they're like, oh,
Absolutely.
yeah, that so and so was there. And they took all
Yeah,
these pictures. And
absolutely.
I just felt so left out. I was like, this looks awesome. So, yeah, that definitely seems to be the one.
Mm.
Oh, you know what? I just realized. So, as you're going through, I don't know why it just came to me, but
Hmm.
the movie that Chris Evans and Idris Elba and Jeffrey D. Morgan were in,
Hmm.
and I'm totally blanking on what the actress's name was, but she's amazing. The graphic novel and the movie are called, I think it's Losers or The Losers.
Okay.
Um, But yeah, it's very like if people like that
Yeah.
movie or that graphic novel, they'll love The Crew because your book is just like a fantasy version of that. All
Okay.
the characters, yeah, you have to check it out.
I'm,
I'll
so-
send it to you.
yeah, I'm
Yeah,
so
I'll
surprised.
message you on Twitter. It's a really I think I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch it tonight with my son. We like to just chill at night and like
Yeah,
watch a movie.
nice.
Yeah, but it's like literally reminds me of The Losers. Um,
I'm so
but just like a
surprised I
fantasy
haven't
version.
I'm surprised I haven't heard about it because
It's
like
from like
I know
I want to say it's from 2009 or something like that. So it's a pretty old movie now, but it was really good. I think a lot of those people were, hadn't really blown up yet. Now they're,
okay.
like now Jeffrey Dean Morgan's, pretty huge. Idris
Mhm.
Elba's like blown up,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that was before Luther and Chris Evans. That's like he was in the Fantastic Four too, I think, like right before that or something.
yeah. Okay,
But he hadn't really blown up yet. Like he definitely wasn't Captain America yet. So I think
okay.
it's like,
Yeah,
but it's a hidden gem, I think.
I need
But
to
yeah, I
check
think
it out.
that you'd really like. I think it'd be right up your alley.
Okay,
So the
cool.
graphic novel was amazing too.
Oh, nice.
So for that last question there, do you have any news, updates, current projects, any promos, anything at all going on that you can share with our audience?
Um, so let's see. So the audiobook for The Crew was released about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So I'm very happy about that because I know people love audiobooks, and I made a really big effort to try and get that done. Since I'm based in the most indie authors, they go through ACX,
Oh,
which
yep,
is
yep.
yeah, which is owned by Amazon. The problem for me is that they are exclusive to people in the UK and the US. So they are
Hate that.
not so yeah, so they weren't an option for me. So I was like, oh shit, okay.
Yeah,
So I had to do everything basically on my own, research everything, find a narrator that I liked, find a different publishing company that could put the book on Audible because I wanted to be available on Audible, right?
yeah,
Yeah, so I had to do a lot of research. I had to put in a lot of my own money to make it happen. But I'm really happy with the end result, and from what I'm hearing from people is that they are also happy with audiobooks. So it
Oh,
feels like
awesome.
it's worth it. Yeah. Other than that, I am working hard on the sequel to The Crew that I plan to release exactly 1 year after The Crew. So that would be the
Oh,
29th of November,
oh, cool.
2023. Yeah. So what else? No, I think that's that. I think that's. I don't have anything more exciting or secret happening at the moment. Just trying to finish book two. This Dragon Con trip coming up. I'm traveling to England also by the end of October to attend Bristol Con, which is another con. Uh,
That one
yeah,
also seems to be pretty popular too. I interview so many European authors where they're
yeah,
like, you got to get over here at some point. I'm
yeah,
like, I'm trying. I'm like, I
yeah,
promise I'll get over there at some point. Like,
yeah.
it's just funny. Like, I have such a huge following over there and so many friends over there. So
Yeah,
it's
it's a
great to go
wonderful,
over
it's
there
a
at some point.
wonderful, it's a super small con, but a lot of people from our sphere of SFF fans and
Yeah, yeah.
readers, authors attend Bristol Con, and it's really cool. Dirk Ashton came
Yep.
2 or 3 years ago over from the US. We had last year Mihir from Fantasy Book Critic blog
Oh,
came
cool.
over. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, so we have a couple of Americans that also make it over from time to time. Yeah, it's a wonderful time. So I recommend BristolCon to anyone
That's awesome.
if they can go. Yeah.
Like I said, I'm a history teacher, so any point when I can get over to Europe, that's like what the only thing is like we're trying to figure out like when we can go because my mom's family's from Ireland and
Mm-hmm.
Scotland, so we kind of
Okay.
wanted to do everything all at once, and take like
Okay.
a little bit longer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So we're trying at some point whenever we go, like we'll probably be there, within like
Yeah.
three
Oh,
weeks.
that's cool.
But it's
Yeah.
funny because I got a lot of friends over there, so they're like, yeah, I got this
Yeah.
Airbnb and it's like pennies compared to over here. They're like,
Mm.
yeah, I'll just give it to you for this price. And I'm like, is it really $25 American dollars to stay in your Airbnb? They're like, oh, it's the author price. I'm like, I
Oh, okay.
appreciate that. So
Okay. Okay.
I'm
Cool.
like, that'd
Cool.
be really cool. They're like, just get over here, we'll take care of you. So I'm like,
Nice.
speaking of great community. So
Yeah. Yeah. For
yeah, so
sure.
I'm really looking forward at some point to getting over there.
Yeah.
But
You need to
well, this
visit.
has been awesome.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No. You need to visit Sweden at some point also if you're into history,
Oh, you know
right?
what? So
Because
as I say, there's about five of you that I like really would like to go and
yeah.
visit. I just like I was actually surprised. Holy blanking, because it's one of the authors I have for season one of the female authors. But yeah, like speaking of Airbnb, so she was like, "Yeah, I got this nice little cottage, that
Hmm.
overlooks like our area." And they had like a bigger like farm property, and I just could not believe like like the scenery. I was like, yeah, it's got
Hmm.
to be on my list at some point. So yeah, it
Yeah,
was really
yeah.
awesome. But yeah,
Cool.
that'd be really cool. Well, before I forget though, I just want to mention, I did because I forgot to do this as like kind of a follow-up, but like speaking again of your cover, I just want to say that like it looks really great, but it also gave me like some really cool nostalgic like video game vibes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like Final Fantasy and stuff. So I
Yes.
just wanted to say, like, I thought you guys did like a great job of that. And it felt like it really matched the genre, but it has enough uniqueness,
Hmm.
from the cover and the characters that I was like, okay, this is gonna be a little different. So again, with vibe, I just felt like it matched your opening scene and the vibe of the book really well. So I just want to point that out for the audience. So if you like, if they like your cover, I think they'll really like, and the premise, I think they'll really like the book. But I also think that it just really goes to show that, like you said, like it's really important to get that cover right.
Yeah.
I think you got the cover right, the blurb right, and that beginning scene. And I think, a lot of times those are the big humps that you have to get over as, like a first time, book for people. So I think if you can do those things, I think that, you'll be really successful. And I think you did each of those three things really well. So I just want to mention that I thought the
Thank
cover was really unique. It caught my interest right away. That's what how Facebook is, there's so
Yeah,
many
yeah,
ads
yeah.
and things but when I think it was Dirk shared your book, I noticed
Hmm.
the cover right away, and I actually went up to your name
Okay.
from there. So I just think that you guys did a really great job there, kind of encapsulating the book and what it's about. The vibe. I was like, this is a
Yeah.
vibe book, and this is a
Okay.
vibe cover, and it
That's
really
awesome.
caught it really well. So I just wanted to mention that before we got
That's
done.
awesome.
That was
I
really
really
cool.
appreciate that. And also, every time someone mentions Final Fantasy, it makes me super happy because I'm a huge fan of the Final Fantasy games, and that was definitely in the back of my mind when it came to the cover. Because we're used to seeing the group of characters from those games on the cover, as you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's also some Final Fantasy Easter eggs in the book itself. So some
Oh,
people
that's
have found
cool.
them, some people haven't. Well, yeah, but it's a fun thing.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to be paying more attention now. That's awesome. All right, Sadir. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I know we had to reschedule a couple times with babies and both of us being sick and stuff.
Yeah,
So I'm
yeah,
so glad that we could do this and
we made it.
keep you on schedule for
Yeah,
for season three. So
awesome.
yeah. So if there's anything else you need in the meantime, just let me know. If you start to get some of that news and updates, for book two, send whatever my way and I'll throw it out to everybody. Like I
Much
said, I'll be
appreciated.
emailing you a lot of things. So
Yeah,
I know you guys aren't on our I don't know. I don't think you guys are on our list for, I think it's just UK. So I will be sending you privately some of my notes and things like that for my Kindle
okay,
Vella series. That way you can
cool,
see
cool.
what you and Paul have inspired me to do.
Awesome, awesome.
But yeah, other than that, if there's anything else I can do, just hit me up in the Facebook group or my email, or obviously you have me on Twitter and just message me and I will help you out as best I can. But other than that, I look forward to talking to you on social media, my friend.
Thank you, my friend, and I appreciate everything that you do for the community with this
Oh, for sure.
podcast and always spreading the words about book releases and introducing new authors. So, thank you.
Anytime, anytime. Well, you have a good rest of your afternoon there, Sadir, and I will talk to you soon, my friend.
Yes, have a good weekend.
You too. Bye.
Bye bye.